There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with another tag, and this is one where I'm kind of the grandmother of this tag, but it's not my tag. It's a fabulous tag that I grandmothered. It's called Under Further Consideration, and it was originated by Sarah over at Hardcover Hearts. I will put a link to her original tag, and I'm assuming any of you that follow me follow her because, you know, we're really the same person. So much so that she saw my N is for novella version of the alphabet soup tag that I am slowly creating. And one of the prompts on the N for novella tag was, N is for not aging well, a book you liked less than when you read it. And several people misinterpreted or didn't interpret that prompt the way that I envisioned it, and I probably didn't phrase it precisely enough. Because some people talked about books that they didn't like as much upon a rereading as they had on the first reading. That's not what I intended, but that's fine. That's still an interesting topic. But Sarah understood it perfectly. A book that's not aging well when you recollect it, when you think back on it after some distance has passed since you finished it. That is the basis, that idea, that dilemma of a book nerd is what she has created this tag out of, and I think it's fabulous. So in this tag, we are to choose 3 time periods, and I'm choosing the last 3 years, not including this year, because I think it's too fresh. But I'm choosing 2016, 2017, and 2018, and I have perused my Goodreads to answer the prompts that she has come up with, and I must say that I have added one more that's relevant for me, and maybe to others, I don't know. So prompt number 1, what was a book that you were possibly too generous in your praise or rating when you read it? Number 2, what is a book that you now think you underrated? And 3, what is a book that has stayed with you in some way? Those are all fabulous questions, and I've added, because I am the Empress of Bailing, so I've added number 4 to this. A bail I might try again from each of those years, 2016, 2017, and 2018. So without further ado, let's get started. For 2016, a novel that I think I was too generous with, giving it a 4-star rating, was a novel that was published that year, The Mirror Thief by Martin Say. It's set in 3 different time periods, 16th century, mid-20th century, and early 21st century. It's kind of complicated and about card counting at Las Vegas or something, and the magic of mirrors or something that wasn't magical realism. That's all I can really remember. I'm glancing down with what's the unhappy version of nostalgia at the Wikipedia page. It just wasn't for me, and I still gave it 4 stars because I thought it was really well done. And that's one of the very few books that I have not rated subjectively. So subjectively, I would say, based on my enjoyment, it was a 2-star read. The writing was good, the structure of the novel was sound, but it was so boring and uninteresting and cold, detached, and macho. Ugh. So I gave it too much praise. I was being too nice. What the hell happened to me that day? Lindy, if you're watching, I gave the book to you. Did you read it? Did you like it? Number 2 for 2016 is a book that I thought I underrated. And to be honest, I went through very carefully and I have nothing. I was not too strict on any of them. Number 3, a book that has stayed with you from my 2016 year of reading, that has stayed with me in some way, and there were a few contenders, but one, because I just haven't talked about it enough on my channel, is I guess in a way it's a gay novel. It's more than that. It's a novel by a gay writer from the UK, Pilcrow by Adam Mars Jones, and I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. It's about a young man growing up in, I believe, the 1950s in Great Britain, and he has some serious physical disabilities that leave him bedridden. And he grows up, and so he's institutionalized from about the age of, I can't remember when, 10 maybe. And he comes from a very dysfunctional family, but his home life is definitely a big part of the story, but then he's institutionalized, and then the world of that institution, you can just imagine what it would have been like in the 1950s in any part of the world, in this instance, the United Kingdom. And in that environment, this quirky, creative, brilliant kid comes out to himself, and he actually explores his sexuality as a teenager. Now, let it be said, I have to say that I struggled with this 500-page novel where so much of it was in his room with the same nurses coming in and out and the same grumpy doctor and the same friends for much of his life there. Boy, has that stuck with me. The tedium of his reality was so wonderfully expressed that what was kind of a negative, it kind of dragged. In retrospect, that was the beauty of the novel. To take the reader through that, and for me to experience that so deeply, and to just be in awe of this young man who made so much and explored so much in such a austere, uninspiring background. Just incredible. There's a sequel that I have not read, so I must, note to self, get to that maybe next year. Really stuck with me. Pilcrow by Adam Mars Jones. And a bail from my year of reading, 2016, that I might try again. There were several contenders because I had a lot of bails. This is where I came out of the closet as the queen of bailing. I promoted myself to Empress status in 2017 because I think I had 120 or something. But The Unseen World by Liz Moore. I appreciated what everybody else appreciated about it for the first third or something, and then I got so bored with that daughter, the narrator. I don't know if she was the narrator, but she was the protagonist. Her father gets, at a very young age, like 60 or something, gets Alzheimer's and is institutionalized. And she is just such a boring protagonist. It's not that I hated her, but I couldn't stand how bored I was having this incredible story filtered through such a boring person, and I bailed. But I'm the only person I know who felt that way, and everybody else and their dog just raves about this novel. So I think I should try it again. But I'm not confident that I'll have a different opinion. That is one thing that makes me bail on a book or dislike a book intensely, is a dull protagonist or narrator. All right, let's move on to 2017. A book I was possibly too generous with. Definitely, I was too generous with this biography of Princess Margaret. Ma'am Darling, 99 Glimpses of Princess Margaret by Craig Brown. I think I gave it 5 stars at first, and then I downgraded it to 4. But the more I think about it, what he tried to do was brilliant. 99 bite-sized essays, a page, 2 pages, about some aspect of her life or some phase of her life. Those started out like little gems, and there's so much gossip, so well told, but it devolved. And the way that it devolved, in the end, I'm more unsatisfied with now than I was at the time. And I also, in retrospect, I am a work in progress and am waking up gradually, being woken up gradually by my culture and the wonderful women around me that teach me every day that this was a really misogynistic treatment of her. No, I was too generous. One little bite-sized chapter in particular just really sticks in my craw. She is photographed with the teenage son of her friends that she was visiting at their house, and the young man has a very visible erection in the photo. And this writer just did a cultural analysis of Princess Margaret's fetishistic hotness in a way that it just makes me angry. But that was the worst of a bunch like that. This is fun! Number 2, what's a book that you now think you underrated from 2017? In 2016, I read Mapp and Lucia, E.F. Benson's most celebrated masterpiece comic novel about Miss Mapp and Lucia. and I've talked about it ad nauseum on this channel. And then my second choice was one earlier in the series called Queen Lucia. And I was disappointed by it. It was earlier in his writing career, and it was earlier in the series, but I didn't like it nearly as well. I didn't find that it had the literary depth, that the characters were as fully drawn, and so the humor just didn't work for me. So I give it 3 stars. And I said that if I'd read it first, I doubt I would have gone on to read Map and Lucia. And the fact that I did it the opposite order also probably made me like it less than I would have if I'd read it first. That's a catch-22. But I also think I didn't probably give it a fair shake because I did it exclusively on audio, and I just remember it was at a time when I was probably doing 3 books on audio and 12 other books in print or ebook. I wasn't at my most open and receptive, so it's one I'd like to try again. It is the first one. I see that. It is the first in the Map and Lucia series. So I think I should do it again. I remember talking with my friend Leah, and she loved it, or liked it a lot better than I did, and was surprised that I didn't like it. So that's also part of why I think I'd like to try it again and just read it, or do it on audio, but not be so distracted. So there you go. A book from 2017 that has really stuck with me. There was several, but this is one I haven't talked about enough on my channel. The Scottish novel O Caledonia by Elspeth Barker. I did this as a buddy read on Litsy. I don't remember who found out about it. Oh, I do remember. Ali Smith's Buy the Book in the New York Times. She cited this as one of her favorite novels, and none of us who were into Ali Smith had heard of this novel, so 4 or 5 of us decided to buddy read it. And it is amazing. O Caledonia. It's a novella published in 1991. I think it's the only one of the few books that Elspeth Barker ever wrote. I think she's still alive. Her life story is worth a book in itself. You can go to her Wikipedia page. Otherwise, this video will be too long. But this novel about a 16-year-old bullied, creative girl in the Scottish Highlands had an indelible impact on me. I think about it often, the mood and her wonderfully weird personality, and how much nobody in her world ever understood her, and you just couldn't help but pity her, but also celebrate her just defiant individuality. Yeah, this was a real treasure. Number 4, for my version of this tag, a bail that I might try again. Definitely, this was a bail on the very last day of, what year are we talking about here? 2017. I remember Kenji and I were flying back to Japan from Canada, and I was about, the bookmark's still in here, I was almost halfway through this novel, The Looking Glass Sisters by Gorl Gabrielsen, Norwegian novelist. This is a Pyrian Press book translated from the Norwegian by John Irons, and it's really well written, and the story was so interesting, but it was about 2 elderly, fairly late middle-aged sisters. I think neither of whom had ever married, and the protagonist, if there was one, the protagonist was disabled, and there was no love lost between them. And it was such an unpleasant story, and they were treating each other, and their feelings towards each other were so horrible that I just thought, I don't want this to be the last book that I read in 2017, so I bailed. I set it aside, but someday I'll come back to it. I will. I gotta, be having a lot of happy things going on in my life to read this alongside, because it was just the animosity and the vindictiveness. Whew. But it was interesting. And 2018, a book I thought I might have been too generous to. I might disappoint some of you, but this one is not aging extremely well in my memory, and that is Red Clocks by Lenny Zumas. I gave it 5 stars, and I struggled with it at the time because I was doing it on audio, and I did about half of it on audio. I think audio text combo, but mostly on audio, and I wasn't connecting with the audio narrator. And when I abandoned the audio narrator and read it myself for the last half, I connected so much more deeply with it that I gave it 5 stars. But I think that was too generous, and, it's now maybe a year later. I don't remember when last year I read it. It's not really that great. It's definitely probably a 4-star read. I think that it was socially relevant at a moment in time, horrifically socially relevant, but as a novel, it was not a masterpiece. And you can see how fuzzy my critique of it is. It's just not aging well. I would probably more accurately bring this down to about a 4 and maybe reread it someday to see if it holds up, but not a 5-star read in my memory now. A book that I was perhaps stingy with my star ratings with from last year was a novel by an Iranian-American writer, Refuge, by Dina Nayeri, and her name may be familiar to some of you more recently because her memoir has just been published. Refugee. This was her novel, her last novel. She's written maybe 2 novels. Her most recent novel, I think it was published in I don't know when it was published, quite recently. It's Refuge, and then now her new memoir in 2019 is Refugee, which I very much want to read. For me, prompt number 2, a book that you might have been too harsh with, and prompt number 3, a book that has stuck with you, are almost the same topic, because it's the books that stay in my memory beyond what I gave them as a rating that make me want to up the rating. And this is one, but I'm using this for prompt number 2 because that opening scene, and I know I talked about it in my wrap-up at that time, the main character is an Iranian American, and she and her mother came to America during the beginning of the Khomeini years as refugees. The father stayed. He was a fairly preeminent... Actually, what was he? I was going to say lawyer. No, I'm getting mixed up because I just recently read a short story by Nayeri, so I don't want to get the details mixed up. But anyway, he stayed, and so they never saw him. The parents were estranged, but the daughter only saw him about 3 more times during the course of the novel over a 20-year span. She was young, like 10 or 12, when she left Iran, and the cultural differences between them were so wide. And it was a really rich portrayal of that. And I will never forget the opening scene because he is trying to get a divorce from his 3rd wife. And the scene of that divorce proceeding in an Iranian court and all the clerks and all the other people waiting and all this stuff. It was one of the best scenes in a novel that I've ever read. On the basis of that opening scene, it's a 5-star read, but the way that it stayed with me for all the other things that it really does well, the rich characters and that memorable exploration of not only the immigrant experience, but the refugee experience, I think it's a stunning novel, and I commend it to you. It's also really good on audio. A book that has stayed with me from last year, and I haven't talked about it beyond wrapping it up. It has really stayed with me, and nobody is talking about it except me and Liberty Hardy from All the Books podcast via Book Riot. She's the one who told me about this. I mean, she talked about it on an episode, and that's how I found out about it, and it took me forever to get the novel and read it. She talked about it 3 years ago. When was it published? 2016. She talked about it in 2016. I didn't get it until maybe early last year, and I read it last year, and I loved it. Sonia Chung is a Korean-American writer. She's written one other novel that I'm definitely going to track down at some point, Long for This World, and she lives in New York City, and this novel is about a young Korean-American girl, 15 or something, who's babysitting for friends of her mother's, work friends, like co-workers of her mother's, an African-American family. And the Korean-American family and the African-American family are given equal treatment in this novel, and she pulls it off beautifully. All of the characters are so well done, and there is something that's very challenging to read about that I'm not really a big believer in trigger warnings, but do some due diligence on it. It's not explicit, but it's also ambiguous as to how bad the bad thing was. Putting all that aside, there's a family tragedy that occurs that involves all of these people, and their backstories are explored in a way that's just balanced and pitched perfectly. What an amazing writer. Where is she and where is her next book and why haven't you guys read it? But like I say, there is an aspect of intergenerational sexuality that would be disturbing to some viewers. So there, I said it. It's very ambiguous, but it's definitely threaded throughout and would make some readers uncomfortable. I just think this was a stunning book. And a Bale I might try again, so that's very interesting. I didn't do 2019 because it's too fresh. 2018, when I looked at my very lengthy list of Bales, my gorge rose every time with each book. You couldn't pay me to try one of those again. Well, this was a great tag. So I'm going to tag a whole swack of yous and see what you come up with. Greg of Supposedly Fun. Veronica of V's Reads and Rambles. I know you're busy with your new job, but whenever you get to this, I'd love to see what you come up with. Jason Harrigan. Juan of Bookish Islander. Mel of Mel's Bookland Adventures. Heidi of My Reading Life. Charlie Brook. Bear Reads Books. Julia's Book Time. And Kathy of Grim Reads. Have at it! Thanks for watching.
Thank you.